This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The World Health Organization approves China's Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine for emergency use. African Union suspends Mali over military coup and threatens sanctions. And in our continuing series on kidnappings in Nigeria, today we shed light on challenges that security forces in the country face. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live here on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, in business, South Africa's unemployment rate reaches new record high in Q1. And in sports, support for Algerian star Riyad Mahrez surges in Tunisia despite Champions League heartache. Welcome to Africa Live. Now, China's CoronaVac vaccine has been endorsed by the World Health Organization. On Tuesday, WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus said Sinovac is safe and effective. The UN health body also validated it for emergency use. Sinovac is the second Chinese jab to receive WHO's endorsement after Sinopharm, which was approved last month. The WHO recommends the Sinovac jab for adults over 18 years with a 2-dose plan and a 2 to 4 weeks spacing. Let's get more on that story now. We're now joined by Professor Shabir A. Mahdi, who is a professor of vaccinology at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. Professor, how important is this for Africa, which is lurking behind in its efforts to vaccinate its population?
Good day. So any new vaccine that becomes available for global use obviously is extremely important. And the Sinovac vaccine is no different from any of the other vaccines in terms of its possible use to reduce the number of people that end up dying and end up being hospitalized from COVID-19. The main issue right now is twofold. Firstly, I think there still needs to be some work that's done in terms of understanding how well the Sinovac vaccine, as well as a few of the other vaccine, works against the type of variants that are dominating in sub-Saharan Africa, and that is now known as the Beta variant, which was first identified in South Africa. And the data on that for the Sinovac vaccine, as well as a few of the other vaccines, is still relatively sparse. But that being said, the other big issue is how quickly Sinovac would be able to scale up manufacture and make the vaccine available to the COVAX facility, as well as to other countries that are wanting to actually purchase a vaccine. These sort of approvals are not going to be of much use if the companies aren't able to scale up manufacture of the vaccine immediately into the hundreds of millions of doses so that we can get it into the arms of people sooner rather than later.
Now, Professor, Egypt is expected to start locally producing China's Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine this month. How has Beijing helped to improve access to COVID-19 vaccines across Africa?
So that is welcome news. But at the same time, we also need to understand that if Egypt starts producing a vaccine now, it doesn't mean that the vaccine is going to become available in a month or two. It depends where they are when it comes to the technology transfer. And again, this is something which is a global issue as to what extent companies that hold the patent rights for their COVID vaccines should start engaging with other manufacturers in low and middle income countries, including doing the technology transfer. So while this technology transfer is important, it is not the immediate solution to trying to save lives from COVID-19. We would achieve much more if the current capacity in those countries where the vaccines are already being produced is expanded immediately. So the medium-term plan should be for African countries to be able to produce vaccine and become less dependent on other sources of vaccine from outside of the continent. But in the immediate future, the emergency that we face with is one that demands the scaling up of manufacture of vaccines in those facilities that are already established.
Finally, Professor, taking all this in, how will this then help Africa catch up in terms of vaccinating its population after lagging behind?
Yeah, like I said, it really depends to what extent Sinovac and the other manufacturers can scale up their manufacture in their current facilities. Waiting for the technology transfer to take place is not going to assist us. By the time we have adequate capacity to produce vaccine on the continent, the COVID-19 pandemic very likely would have passed already. So again, to emphasize that it's important that this vaccine has been now approved for use by WHO, but its public health impact is going to be completely dependent on how well the company is able to scale up its manufacture of the vaccine and make it available to low and middle income countries.
Professor, thank you very much for speaking to us on Africa Live. That was Professor Shabir A. Mahdi, who is a professor of vaccinology at the University of Witwatersrand, joining us live from Johannesburg. Moving on, the heads of the world's predominant global financing, health and trade agencies have united to urge government leaders to urgently finance a new $50 billion roadmap. The roadmap aims to accelerate the equitable distribution of health tools to help end the coronavirus pandemic. And as CGTN's Wanja Mungai reports, it will also set the foundations for a global recovery as well as enhanced health security.
A recent International Monetary Fund staff analysis states $50 billion is needed in new investment. This will hasten the equitable distribution of diagnostics, oxygen, treatment, medical supplies and vaccines.
Securing funds to roll out health tools equitably. Now is the moment for leaders to share vaccine doses with COVAX, ensure health workers and other at-risk people are protected and extinguish variants.
Leaders from the International Monetary Fund, World Bank Group, World Health Organization and World Trade Organization say governments must act immediately to finance the new roadmap and ensure the world recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the leaders, further delay of financing the new roadmap could risk continued waves and explosive COVID-19 outbreaks.
Overnight, I joined leaders from the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, and the World Bank Group in publishing an op-ed in many newspapers around the world that calls for a new commitment with a $50 billion rapid investment to fund the equitable distribution of vaccines and other crucial health tools. We particularly welcome that in the proposal, the majority of the new funding would be made available quickly through grants, including to fill the Act Accelerates funding gap. This would help us dramatically scale up the production of diagnostics, treatments, oxygen, medical equipment, and vaccines for equitable distribution.
You may ask, why is the IMF concerned with vaccinations? We are deeply concerned because an increasingly two-track pandemic is causing a two-track economic recovery with negative consequences for all countries. And our data shows that in the near term, vaccinating the world is the most effective way to boost global output. In other words, vaccine policy is economic policy.
The leaders also say cooperation on trade is also needed to ensure free cross-border flows and increasing supplies of raw materials and finished vaccines. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
Now, a number of U.S. politicians are calling for a relook at the coronavirus lab leak theory with a new intelligence report which allegedly sheds light on a theory which postulates the virus which causes COVID-19 was leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But as CGTN reporter Dong Shui asks, is it scientists or politicians who have the final say as to what the origins of the coronavirus are?
The U.S. is back with its lab leak theory on the origins of COVID-19. This time around, a so-called undisclosed intelligence report citing anonymous U.S. officials is being relied upon. The report alleges that 3 researchers from the Wuhan Institute of Virology were sick enough to be hospitalized in November 2019, a few weeks before China reported its first case. It claims this situation adds weight to suspicions that the virus may have leaked from the lab. This theory that has been widely ridiculed by a number of scientists. U.S. President Joe Biden has ordered his spies to bring back a definitive conclusion in 90 days. Since when have we been using intelligence reports to track down the source of pandemics? We've been down this road before that leads to nothing but a dead end. But well, let me reanalyze what we have at hand. So what we're looking at is an article published in the Wall Street Journal on May 23rd, and it has been written by none other than Michael Gordon. Rings a bell? Gordon shoot to fame, or disgrace for that matter, with his efforts to drum up support for the American invasion of Iraq about 20 years ago. He co-authored an article for the New York Times with Judith Miller in September 2002 titled Threats and Responses. The Iraqis, U.S. says Hussein intensifies quest for a bomb part. It made it to the front page. It asserted that Iraq has stepped up its quest for nuclear weapons and has embarked on a worldwide hunt for materials to make an atomic bomb. Can you guess what was the source of their information? Yes, you guessed it right. Anonymous American officials and intelligence experts. Of course, we now know there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The whole article had no basis, yet Gordon avoided censure. And all of this reminds me of an old saying, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. It seems to be the mantra for the US government these days. But what do scientists think? Early this year, a group of WHO-appointed scientists flew to Wuhan and spent 12 days there, which included a visit to this lab under fire. Ultimately, they concluded that a virus leak from the lab was extremely unlikely.
The findings suggest that the laboratory incident hypothesis is extremely unlikely.
Dominic Dwyer, a health medical virologist and infectious disease physician in New South Wales, who spent 4 weeks in Wuhan earlier this year, said there was no evidence to back up the lab leak theory. And let's see what he had to say.
The fact that President Biden said that he's getting conflicting reports from his intelligence agencies, to me suggests that there is no clear evidence, because otherwise it would be obvious what was going on.
Meanwhile, Vincent Ricaniello, virology professor at Columbia University, said it's absolutely 100% impossible that SARS-CoV-2 was made in the laboratory. The elements in the virus SARS-CoV-2 all came from bad SARS-like CoVIDs that circulate in nature. I understand that it's essential to trace the origins of the virus, which has so far claimed 3.5 million lives worldwide, so we can prevent it from happening again. However, this is the job of scientists, not politicians. As Ricaniello once said, intelligence is not a science-based effort. It's basically spying. They aren't telling us where they got the information, because that's the important part of spying. And Dwyer also said,
the more people fight about it, or the more people use politics to score points or whatever it might be, the less likely you are to get the cooperation to work together to sort it out.
After all, it took nearly 15 years to trace the origins of SARS. Isn't 90 days too soon to expect conclusions?
Let's shift our focus to East Africa now. Uganda's health ministry has started a 10-day vaccination camp to increase access to COVID-19 vaccines amid a surge in coronavirus infections. Over 600 cases were reported in the country over several days at the end of last month. That has now got thousands rushing for the jab, as Leon Senyange reports from Kampala.
Martha Valerie had held back on taking the COVID-19 vaccination. After much thought, she decided to queue for the first dose.
I didn't take it so serious until I actually got time and there was a rise in cases, so I felt like this is the time I should get it.
Like Valerie, Anthony Papira had his own reservations.
People had different perception of the vaccine, and as a human being, you'll also kind of try to weigh in, should I go or should I not? But at the end of the day, that shouldn't give you a reason when you get infected. So I feel this is the right thing to do.
Many Ugandans are now rushing to get the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine at this 10-day open camp set up by the country's health ministry. The camp is now a central facility with more healthcare workers and easy to access. More than 8,000 people have been vaccinated in just 2 days of the campaign. The health officials say they are impressed with the response and expect the numbers to double in the coming days. Uganda started its campaign when it received 964,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. An average 11,000 doses are being administered each day across the country.
We've broken through the barrier mentally for the people who are not willing to take the vaccine. Now we are at such a trajectory where every time you think somebody's coming, and then as people are vaccinated, they make all of us safer.
The Health Ministry expects to use up the available doses by the end of June. However, there's uncertainty over access to more doses.
Even COVAX facility, they are still telling us, wait, we are going to give you information. So we are waiting. We can't tell you when.
The Health Ministry has registered over 47,000 COVID-19 cases since March last year. Disruption in supply of vaccines from India's Serum Institute is certain to affect Uganda's COVID-19 vaccination plan. That's even more challenging when the country is experiencing a surge in COVID-19 infections. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Now, the coronavirus pandemic has pushed Africa into recession for the first time in 30 years. That's according to a new Mo Ibrahim Foundation report. The report explains that economic shutdowns are to blame for the depression. The report also says that millions of lives were saved in Africa due to strict travel restrictions and robust contact tracing at the onset of the pandemic. It also reveals that cases of violence in Africa rose by 78% and 90 people succumbed to police brutality during the pandemic. The report was released ahead of the annual Mo Ibrahim Foundation conference set for this weekend. Elsewhere, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has warned those that are involved in promoting violence in the southeast of the country will be dealt with accordingly. Electoral offices and police stations have been burned down in recent months in the region. Armed gangs have also carried out a series of killings of police officers in the area, prompting a security operation in May. Nigerian authorities have blamed those attacks on a banned separatist group, the Indigenous People of Biafra, and its armed wing, the Eastern Security Network. But the group, however, denies any involvement. Well, let's get more insights on that story. CGTN's Phil Ihaza joins us for more. Phil, tell us why President Buhari has threatened the rebels in the southeast.
Well, thank you, Mahia. The president made it clear that he will not sit and watch the country, go into another form of civil war, especially with the fact that he gave account of how that he fought during the civil war, which took place several decades ago, how that it lasted for 30 months and how that the nation lost a lot of resources, assets and facilities in the country. Lots of lives were also lost, and it was indeed a chaotic situation, and therefore he will not allow under his watch or his administration for any form of rebels or groups that are agitating for whatever reasons, to take laws into their hands and perpetrate evil. So he's made that statement very clear and also instructed security operatives to do whatever they can to comb the region and ensure that peace is restored, calm is restored, and any perpetrators of these criminal activities are brought to book. So it is clear because we've seen this violence on electoral formations, offices and facilities, as well as security formations go on for quite a while. And in spite of the fact that several security operatives have been deployed there, the president is saying that more will be done to ensure that peace is restored to the southeast region.
And Phil, elsewhere, the abductors of Niger State Islamic students have demanded ransom. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, it's a sad situation, the fact that in several parts of the country now, from the southeast, to the northwest and north central, there are several security situations that the country is having to deal with. So in Niger State, for example, there's a demand for ransom, and that has been confirmed by the head teacher of the Islamic school in Niger State there, Abubakar Al-Hassan. He says the call came in late Monday evening, from the abductors demanding for 110 million naira, that's about $270,000 for ransom. The head teacher also says that the entire management of the school has communicated with the state government to about this latest development, but the state government has stated clearly that they will not in any way give any form of ransom or heed to the demands of the abductors. That's understandably so, because just a few weeks or months ago, the president ordered and warned all state governments to desist from paying ransoms, to ensure that the kidnapping industry does not become lucrative, to also prevent any of such perpetrators to stop those acts. And so what we're looking at now is the order from the president for security operatives to do all they can to search and rescue or find these abducted children, about roughly 200 of them in Niger State.
Phil, thank you very much for that. CGTN's Phil Ihaza joining us live from Abuja, Nigeria. Well, staying in the country, Nigeria is facing an unprecedented security challenge that has stretched the country's security forces. From Boko Haram jihadists in the country's northeast, banditry in its northwest, separatist militants in its southeast, and communal clashes in the central region, Nigeria's security forces are struggling to maintain peace in a country that is not at war. In today's continuing series on Nigeria kidnappings, CGTN's Deji Badmus reports.
The country's security forces have not faced the kind of security challenges they're dealing with at the moment. The Nigerian military is currently carrying out military operations in nearly every region of the country, stretching its less than 200,000 troops to the limit. This is in addition to the protracted counterinsurgency war against jihadist groups like Boko Haram and ISWAP, a campaign that has been going on since 2009.
Areas where the police are supposed to curtail, the police should be deployed to address such security threats. You look at banditry, kidnapping, rape, armed robbery, and what have you. These are within the core competence of the Nigerian police. There's no reason involving the military. Where we should deploy the military should be with regards to terrorism, threats to national security. But as we speak, we have deployed the military to every act of criminality in this society, and so the military is overstretched. What is the police doing? Where is the Nigerian police in all this?
It's estimated that the Nigerian police has about 320,000 personnel, but a substantial part of that number are used for VIP security services, further straining the force.
What needs to happen is the subnationals need to get involved. The state governments need to be empowered to get their own local policing, because if you police every level, police every local government, police every state, then it's easy for the military to come in as a response force, as people with superior firepower. Because after all, terrorists, we know the way they operate. They conduct surveillance, they get their material together before they strike. So this can be detected, and this can even be combated at a local level.
Overstressed and not well equipped, especially for guerrilla warfare, the Nigerian military has struggled to end the Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast of the country. The violence has left an estimated 20,000 people dead and at least 2 million people displaced since 2009. With banditry and militant secessionists coming into the mix, the military is further challenged. The authorities say government troops are making progress in dealing with the crisis.
In terms of the insurgency in the northeast, we have been able to take out a lot of the insurgents. I know from the top of my head, from March of last year to December of last year, the military was able to take out 2,403 insurgents, but not everybody knows that. The military was able to free 864 kidnapped victims. Nobody really knows or feels that, because you can only relate to what is happening in your own situation.
There have been calls on the government to seek help by engaging mercenaries to take on the insurgents, something the previous government of the country did. But the president has flatly rejected the idea.
We have the resources. It's just misapplication or underutilization that has affected our ability to deal with these people. And the president has given a new lease of life to the armed forces, and I believe that we should be able to overcome these people without resorting to help.
The government expects to begin to take delivery of Super Tucano fighter jets from the United States in July. The jets are expected to be a game changer in the country's counterinsurgency campaign. Plans are also underway to increase the military budget and recruit more troops.
We need to rejig our security architecture. Areas where we know the police have competence, let us equip them. Let us provide the wherewithal for them to do their job. And you know, like they say, to whom much is given, much is expected. Even if the police are fully equipped to do their job, then they have no reason, you know, not to live up to the billing. And again, the government at every point in time must engage with the citizens, such that the citizenry will become partners in policing and will not see policing of the country or curtailing threats to national security as the responsibility of only the government. They must recognize that the survival of the government or the survival of the states is also their individual survival.
Nigeria's new police chief has pledged to reform the force and make it a more functional one. How soon that happens could make the difference in tackling Nigeria's security challenges. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, let's get yet more insights into the security situation in the country. We're now joined by Dennis Amakri, who is a security consultant and former Nigerian intelligence officer based in Lagos, Nigeria. Dennis, how big, looking at this in more detail, how big a security challenge are abductions and kidnappings in Nigeria?
Thank you very much for having me. Well, it is a big problem for Nigeria, really a plethora of problems happening across the country. And I think we cannot overcome this spate of kidnapping and abductions because of the way we are approaching it. There is no unified or systematic approach in dealing with it. I can tell you for over 10 years that we've been dealing with this. There is no anti-kidnapping plan or, you know, a plan against kidnapping that they have. The police does not have one. The military is not designed to do that. And then, of course, the other security agencies are there, but I don't know if they are working in synergy to face this particular problem.
So, Dennis, I guess the question is, does the Nigerian government have a strategy to deal with abductions, kidnapping and banditry, and is it working? If not, then how can the government go about this?
Well, there is no strategy right now, as far as I'm concerned. What happens is that when there is a kidnap, the scent is just like a fire brigade thing, whereby they have to send people to go, policemen from the Inspector General Response Team, which is a very small team, going around looking for hostages. And I think that does not work very well. They've had some successes, but it does not work. Number one, we have to have a national policy on zero tolerance on payment of ransom, because I believe strongly that kidnapping continues in Nigeria because people are paying, including the government of Nigeria. So when you pay ransom, you strengthen them, and they go back and then get some more money, do what they have to do, and come back at you again. So there must be zero tolerance, and there must be systematic approach to it. That is, if people are kidnapped, also go out and look for them. Don't wait for just them to call you and then you start to negotiate. And of course, we have to remember one thing. Who are the targets? The targets are school children, schools. The schools initiative, the security of schools initiative is not being operative. So you have to keep your schools safe. Because if you just pay a ransom and then they go to another school that is just open there for them to come and take the children. So there must be a systematic approach to dealing with this, no ransom payment, strengthening the security system whereby it will be difficult because we have a low risk, high yield crime, and then all we have to do is to raise the risk of kidnapping and then of course look at the yield, which is the money is not coming in.
Dennis Amakri, thank you very much for speaking to us on Africa Live. Security consultant Dennis Amakri joining us live there from Lagos, Nigeria. Well, it's time for us to take a short break. You're watching Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. The African Union suspends Mali after military coup and threatens sanctions. And French President Emmanuel Macron calls for withdrawal of foreign forces from Libya.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, the African Union has suspended Mali's membership following last week's military coup, which overthrew the civilian-led government. The AU is calling for an unimpeded, transparent and swift return to a civilian regime, and it warns Mali will face sanctions if it fails to do so. Last Monday, the military arrested the former interim president Bandao and Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouane and pressured them to resign. This was followed by a court decision to name junta leader Colonel Assimi Goïta as new president of the transitional government. It is Mali's second coup in 9 months. Elsewhere, Libyan Prime Minister Abdelhamid Dbeibah has met with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris. The two met to discuss Libya's stability and political transition ahead of elections later this year, as well as possible French investments there. Here is CGTN's Wanja Mungai with more.
The meeting took place at Élysée Palace in Paris on Tuesday. During the one-hour talks, President Emmanuel Macron and Libya's Prime Minister Abdelhamid Dbeibah discussed the political transition and stability in Libya.
The Libyans have a right to live in a sovereign, stable and prosperous country. It is also a major regional issue essential to peace and stability in the Sahel, in all the neighboring countries, as well as on the Mediterranean.
The implementation of the October 23rd ceasefire deal was particularly emphasized by President Macron. The United Nations brokered ceasefire was signed by former Libyan warring parties in Geneva. The deal required all foreign fighters and mercenaries to leave Libya within 90 days.
The ceasefire accord of 23rd 2020 has to be fully applied. As Libyans themselves demand it, an end must be put to all foreign meddling. This can only be achieved through the departure of all foreign forces and mercenaries from Libyan soil. Russians, Turks, the Syrian mercenaries, and all the others.
Last month, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that mercenaries and foreign troops had not withdrawn from Libya. He declared it a breach of the agreement. Turkey, that has been a key backer of the previous Tripoli-based government of national unity, insisted it would only withdraw its soldiers if all foreign troops also left. Prime Minister Diba's visit to Paris comes after he met Algerian and Italian heads of state in Algiers and Rome so as to drum up support for his new government. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
The Tunisian Red Crescent says at least 23 African migrants drowned in the Mediterranean Sea on Tuesday while crossing over to Italy from Libya. The humanitarian organization says the deaths occurred during 2 shipwreck incidents at sea. The Tunisian Navy says they have rescued 109 people from both accidents. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, less than 23,500 people have managed to cross over to Europe by sea this year. Tunisia has observed the World No Tobacco Day, which is marked on the 31st of May. This came even as tobacco-related deaths continue to increase in the North African nation. Experts say health awareness campaigns remain the best way to reduce cases of smoking and help many people quit the habit. Adnan Shawashi has more details.
According to the Tunisian Health Ministry, tobacco consumption kills over 10,000 people in the North African country annually. Lung and allergy specialists say the major causes of increased deaths among smokers are diseases that are related to smoking, including cancer as well as respiratory and vascular diseases.
Smoking is a scourge which causes many diseases. Their number is on the rise. The components of a cigarette cause multiple inflammations, cancers and other deadly diseases. According to the World Health Organization, some 10 million people will die of tobacco smoking each year. It is the same trend in our country, an increase in the number of smokers and deaths.
Amr Hosni is a 63-year-old retiree from the capital city Tunis. He followed the health department's Yakfi campaign that urged Tunisians to quit smoking. Yakfi is the Arabic word for enough. The initiative offered 6 weeks of support during the weaning period. However, Amr ended up quitting the campaign instead of quitting smoking.
I've been smoking for more than 5 decades. I know it's dangerous, but it's impossible to quit smoking. It's already in my blood. I cannot breathe when I don't smoke a cigarette. I'm afraid my health will deteriorate if I get rid of my cigarettes. The state campaign to quit smoking is useless for people like me.
Experts assert that quitting smoking before the age of 40 reduces the risk of dying from smoking-related disease by about 90%. Many Tunisians have successfully quit smoking and opted for a healthier life.
Smoking was the biggest mistake of my life. I started smoking at 20 and I smoked cigarettes for over 25 years. My health deteriorated in a substantial manner. I've had a health problem which was my last wake-up call. That's how I quit smoking and opted for a healthier life. I was addicted to smoking. Now I'm addicted to sports.
The Tunisian Health Ministry has launched a new program which it hopes will encourage its citizens to stop smoking. An online platform and a mobile app will be available to assist people quit smoking. Smoking cessation gives you a new opportunity to live is Tunisia's slogan for this year's World No Tobacco Day. The campaign also aims to convince the largest number of people to quit smoking to limit the risk of heart attacks or brain damage. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
And just before we take another short break, here are your business headlines. South Africa's unemployment rate reaches new record high in the first quarter. And Tanzania's business environment laws under review in move to boost trade and investment.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Let's start the business in South Africa. The country's official unemployment rate rose to a new high in Q1 as construction and trade industries shed tens of thousands of jobs. The unemployment rate rose to 32.6% from 32.5% in Q4 last year. According to Stats South Africa, that's the highest number on record. The report shows that the number of employed persons remained almost unchanged at 15 million, with a slight decrease of 28,000 in the first quarter. The number of unemployed people increased by around 8,000 quarter-on-quarter to 7.2 million. The expanded unemployment rate, which also counts the number of discouraged job seekers, increased to 43.2% in Q1 from 42.6% in the final quarter of 2020. Africa's most developed economy went through its deepest recession since at least 1946, with its GDP contracting by 7% in 2020. The South African Reserve Bank said in May that it expects the country's economy to grow by 4.2% this year. Elsewhere, Tanzania's government says it's actively reviewing 22 laws under the Ministry of Industry and Trade with the view to improving the country's business environment. The changes are part of its blueprint for regulatory reforms to remove unnecessary red tape that makes it difficult to trade or invest in Tanzania. From Dar es Salaam, CGTN's Daniel Kijo has the details.
Tanzania's Ministry of Trade and Industries has big plans for the year 2021-2022. It says it is making changes to trade and investment policies so as to boost the industrial sector. Exact clauses in the laws have not been specified, but the minister in charge says dropping unfriendly payments is a start.
Along with other steps, 232 charges and levies that were obstacles and hindrances to doing business have been removed. The government is continuing to evaluate and fix all laws and policies with the aim to improve the business environment as per our plan.
Since assuming presidency, President Hassan has worked to attract new investors, as well as attract those who left to return. Her efforts are paying dividends. Africa's richest man and business guru Aliko Dangote has expressed commitment to invest heavily in the country to create more jobs.
I think the business environment has changed dramatically. Things have opened up, and I can assure you that not only here with the local press, wherever that I go, I will now be the champion of Tanzania and tell people that things have changed. Everybody should come back and invest heavily here in Tanzania.
The government is looking to engage China, Russia, Mauritius, Turkey, Egypt, Israel, DRC Congo, South Sudan and others to sign trade agreements in collaboration with the country's private sector. Experts say this tone is a welcome change from the former late president's stricter, controlled approach to investment management in the country.
The new president is trying to let the business community breathe a bit. That means we are now hearing some very constructive statements from across the government institutions, from the parliament to the government and mostly to the ministries in charge of trade and finance and businesses.
The government says it will also protect local industries as well as increase fair business competition. The government held a meeting with the private sector in 2017 so as to discuss all challenges of doing business in the country. The result? The blueprint, a document outlining tax reforms, agency integrations, and multiple policy changes geared towards a single goal, making business easier. It's hoped that now, with a new captain at the helm, the recommendations from 5 years can fully be executed. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Now, a global surge in the price of maize, partly driven by higher import demand from China, droughts in South America and dry conditions in parts of the United States and Canada have raised local maize prices despite expectations of a bumper harvest in the 2020-2021 season. Elevated prices for the staple crop in South Africa are squeezing cash-strapped consumers in an economy which shed nearly 1.4 million jobs in the year to end March. Angelo Coppola has the details.
Analysts say there are several reasons for these elevated maize prices: regional and global demand and the local exchange rate to the US dollar.
Now, the exchange rate has been firming. If you compare where we are this year in the rand to the dollar compared to last year, these are stronger levels, which means that they point to a potential decline in prices. And in terms of a demand, Southern Africa demand, which was one of the key factors that was driving prices last year, is now very weak this year, with Zimbabwe having record harvest, Malawi good harvest, and across the Southern Africa region.
The impact of rising maize prices on South African consumers has been pronounced. They're not alone.
But also it's adding the increasing input cost pressures on the producers of the livestock sector as well as the poultry sectors. As early as mid-May, companies like Astral Foods in South Africa were already signaling that they might be rising poultry prices because of the higher input costs which are coming from the grain. So for consumers in the near term, this shows that there will be those increasing pressures.
If estimates are accurate and the South African maize crop is a good one, it's good news for the country.
As the harvest picks up momentum, we could see maize prices softening to an extent that we estimate South Africa's food price inflation for the year to average around 5.5%.
While those prices are soaring because of international pressures, it's likely that consumers here will feel a bit of relief towards the end of the year. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, senior Chinese and U.S. officials say the economic relations of both countries are very important. Chinese Vice Premier and Chief Trade Negotiator Liu He spoke with U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen via video link this morning. Xinhua news agency says they discussed the macroeconomic situation extensively. It also says they focused on multilateral and bilateral cooperation, candidly exchanged views on issues of mutual concern, and agreed to keep communications open. Last week, Liu spoke with U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai. It was the first time the top trade negotiators held talks since U.S. President Joe Biden took office. And here's what's coming up in the sport. Support for Algerian star Riyad Mahrez surges in Tunisia despite Champions League heartache.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome to the sport. Now, it goes without saying that Riyad Mahrez has had a stellar 2020-2021 season. The Algerian has seen his team claim the English League Cup and the English Premier League. Manchester City may have lost the UEFA Champions League final last week, but Mahrez remains an African favourite in Tunisia. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi has that story.